On the evening of April 26, 2005, in Durham, North Carolina, Janet Abaroa, a pregnant mother, was found dead in her home with her 6-year-old Kaiden sleeping in the next room. The investigation revealed a tangled web of deceit, infidelity, and financial struggles. As police delved into the case, they uncovered troubling inconsistencies in her husband Raven's story. Accusations of embezzlement and a suspicious life insurance policy added layers to an already complex narrative. What really happened on that fateful night? Janet Abaroa was born on June 19, 1979 in Virginia, as the 7th of 10 children in a devout Mormon family. She was intelligent and athletic, so she distinguished herself from an early age. She excelled in sports like soccer, basketball, and swimming. Her hard work in academics and athletics put her on the first women's soccer team at South Virginia University. In 1988, during her time at the university, Janet met Raven Abaroa. He was a player on the men's soccer team and presented himself as a charismatic suitor who shared her religious beliefs. Their relationship developed rapidly, and they became inseparable. By August 2000, at just 20 years old, Janet married Raven in a ceremony that adhered to their religious traditions. After their marriage, the couple moved to Durham, North Carolina for job opportunities with Eurosport. Initially, they appeared to be a perfect couple. However, signs of trouble began to emerge as financial strains and infidelity issues surfaced in their relationship. The marriage between Janet and Raven Abaroa began to deteriorate in 2003 when Raven confessed to multiple affairs. This admission included a relationship with a minor, which not only shattered Janet's trust, but also introduced significant strains into their already fragile relationship. Following this revelation, Raven temporarily moved out, leaving Janet to confront the emotional turmoil alone. The couple's issues were compounded when Janet discovered she was pregnant with their second child in 2005. This unexpected news created a profound dilemma for her. She was torn between her commitment to her marriage and the reality of Raven's infidelity. In December 2004, Raven Abaroa was arrested for shoplifting at the sporting goods stores where both he and Janet were employed. During the investigation, it was revealed that he had been engaged in a scheme to embezzle goods worth over $9,000 from the store. Raven operated his embezzlement scheme methodically. He ordered athletic shoes and arranged for their delivery to their home address. After receiving the merchandise, he sold the shoes online under the alias Footballer Guy. This approach allowed him to profit from stolen goods while maintaining an appearance of legitimacy. The embezzlement came to light when the supplier contacted the sporting goods store regarding unpaid merchandise. A verification of delivery address quickly led investigators to Raven, resulting in his prompt dismissal from the store and subsequent legal action. Although Janet was not involved in the thefts, she faced significant shame and humiliation due to her husband's actions, leading her to leave her job as well. Raven managed to avoid prison time for his embezzlement. Instead, he was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay restitution of nearly $10,000. The financial strain from Raven's embezzlement and subsequent legal troubles added immense pressure on the young family, who were already struggling to make ends meet. They had received support from their landlord and church community, but Raven's actions exacerbated their dire financial situation. As tensions escalated, Raven took out a life insurance policy on Janet worth $500,000, which raised suspicions about his intentions. This decision seemed particularly questionable given their precarious financial situation and the fact that he had not previously held such policies. Janet increasingly expressed concerns about Raven's aggressive behavior towards her friends, fearing his unpredictable outbursts of anger. These factors, infidelity, financial instability, and escalating tensions, set the stage for the tragedy that was about to unfold. The combination of personal and financial crises created an environment ripe for conflict, ultimately leading to the catastrophic events of April 26, 2005. On April 26, 2005, the day began like any other for Janet Abaroa. She picked up her 6-month-old son, Kaiden, from daycare and returned home. The couple had plans to meet with a member of their church community later that evening. As the day progressed, tensions within the household were palpable, stemming from ongoing marital issues. Around 8:30 p.m., Raven Abaroa prepared to leave for a soccer match in Morrisville. In an unusual move, he locked their 2 dogs in the shed before departing. This behavior was out of character, as the dogs typically slept indoors and provided Janet with a sense of security. When questioned later, this action raised suspicions among investigators. Raven claimed that when he left the house, Janet was getting ready for bed. However, around 10 p.m., he returned home to find her dead on the floor in an unnatural position. Initially, he reported to the 911 dispatcher that she had suffered a gunshot wound. However, it was later determined that she had been stabbed multiple times. When investigators arrived at the Abaroa residence on April 26, 2005, they found Janet Abaroa in a kneeling position on the floor of their bedroom. The scene was grim, with evidence indicating that she had been brutally attacked. An autopsy later confirmed that Janet had suffered multiple stab wounds. Specifically, she had 3 deep stab wounds on her left arm, which was identified as a defensive wound, and 2 fatal stab wounds to her chest and neck. The fatal stab wounds severed an artery and penetrated her lung, leading to her death. The coroner also confirmed that Janet was pregnant at the time of her murder, a fact known only to a few of her closest friends. There were no signs of a struggle or forced entry at the crime scene, and valuables remained untouched. Only Raven's laptop and several kitchen knives were missing from the house. Janet's wedding ring and other jewelry were found untouched on her vanity, suggesting that the victim likely knew her assailant or willingly let them into her home. Crucial evidence collected at the crime scene included a bloody shoe print and a fingerprint that did not match Raven's. These findings raised significant questions about Raven's claims and the circumstances surrounding Janet's death. Raven Abaroa's frantic call reporting that his wife Janet was not breathing came under scrutiny almost immediately. During the call, he initially claimed that she had suffered gunshot wounds. When emergency responders arrived at the Abaroa residence, they found Janet dead from multiple stab wounds, directly contradicting Raven's assertion of a shooting. This discrepancy raised immediate suspicions among investigators regarding the accuracy of Raven's claims. The inconsistencies did not end there. Initially, Raven was cooperative with investigators. However, as the investigation progressed, he informed Janet's family that she had committed suicide. This claim was met with skepticism by her family, who knew Janet's character and strong religious beliefs against taking her own life. Raven provided conflicting statements to law enforcement, too. He initially stated that he found Janet already dead, but later claimed she was alive and had asked him why it hurt so much. Yet, during his call with the 911 dispatcher, he did not ask for help for Janet, but rather informed them that she had been shot. These inconsistencies in his narrative further fueled suspicion about his involvement in Janet's murder. Shortly after Janet's death, Raven moved to Utah with their son Kaiden. His decision to leave North Carolina raised eyebrows among investigators. Furthermore, he attempted to claim the life insurance payout for Janet even before her funeral, which added to the growing concerns regarding his motives. During the investigation, investigators discovered that Raven had backed up all data from his laptop to CDs just one day before the murder, on the 25th of April 2005. This timing was particularly suspicious and raised questions about his intentions leading up to Janet's death. While sorting through belongings following the murder, Janet's sister found these discs containing vital information backed up just before the incident. The discovery of this evidence suggested potential premeditation on Raven's part, and contributed to the mounting case against him. In 2008, Raven married Vanessa Pond, a single mother whose daughter attended the same daycare as his son Kaiden. Initially, Vanessa was hesitant about entering a relationship with Raven, but he persistently pursued her, charming her with his attention and care for her child. He presented himself as a devoted father and partner, which helped him gain Vanessa's trust. However, troubling patterns soon emerged that mirrored those seen in his first marriage to Janet. Reports indicated that Raven exhibited abusive behaviors similar to those he had displayed during his marriage to Janet. Allegations of controlling behavior and emotional manipulation surfaced, raising alarms among those close to Vanessa. Friends and family members noted that Vanessa began to withdraw from her support network and became increasingly isolated as Raven exerted control over her life. Ultimately, Vanessa's marriage to Raven ended due to these allegations of abuse. This cycle of behavior highlighted a disturbing pattern that seemed to follow Raven into his new relationships, suggesting unresolved issues from his past and an inability to maintain healthy partnerships. In the months following Janet Abaroa's murder, the investigation faced significant challenges. Despite the initial suspicion surrounding her husband, Raven Abaroa, there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. Investigators found a bloody shoe print and a fingerprint at the crime scene, but neither matched Raven's. This lack of concrete evidence hindered the prosecution's ability to build a strong case against him. Additionally, Raven's alibi for the night of the murder was confirmed by multiple witnesses who saw him at a soccer match in Morrisville. While this alibi initially appeared to exonerate him, it also complicated the investigation, as detectives struggled to reconcile his presence at the game with the timeline of Janet's death. As time passed and leads dwindled, the case went cold until Detective Charles Soule took over in late 2009. Soule was determined to re-examine all aspects of the investigation with fresh eyes. He meticulously reviewed the evidence collected during the initial inquiry and began focusing on inconsistencies in Raven's statements and behavior. Detective Soule also began questioning whether Janet had been wearing her contact lenses at the time of her death. He theorized that if she was prepared for bed but still had her contacts in, it would contradict Raven's narrative that she was murdered shortly after he left for soccer practice. To investigate this theory further, Soule decided that exhuming Janet's body might provide crucial evidence. The exhumation was necessary to determine if she had been indeed wearing her contact lenses when she died, which provided a clear timeline of events leading up to her murder. In early 2010, Janet's body was exhumed from a cemetery in Pennsylvania. During the examination, investigators confirmed that she had died with her contact lenses still in her eyes. This finding suggested that she had not been preparing for bed as Raven claimed, but rather was likely attacked shortly after he left for the soccer match. The results of this exhumation were significant. They not only contradicted Raven's timeline, but also indicated potential premeditation on his part. The presence of her contact lenses suggests that Janet was caught off guard, raising further questions about Raven's involvement in her murder. As Detective Soule pieced together these elements, Raven's inconsistent statements, his suspicious behavior after Janet's death, and now the evidence from the exhumation, all signs pointed towards his culpability. The inconsistencies in Raven's narrative became increasingly difficult to ignore. With mounting evidence suggesting foul play and a growing belief that Raven had orchestrated his wife's murder, authorities prepared to take decisive action. The stage was set for an arrest that would finally bring justice for Janet Abaroa. On February 1, 2010, Raven Abaroa was arrested in Idaho on charges of first-degree murder in connection with the death of his wife, Janet Abaroa. This arrest followed a lengthy investigation that revealed inconsistencies in his statements and suspicious behavior surrounding the circumstances of Janet's murder. The investigation raised significant doubts about Raven's credibility and involvement in the crime, ultimately leading law enforcement to take decisive action against him. In April 2013, the highly anticipated trial of Raven Abaroa commenced, lasting for 5 weeks. The trial attracted significant media attention due to the nature of the crime and the complexity surrounding the case. The prosecution presented a robust case built primarily on circumstantial evidence. They called over 80 witnesses to testify, including friends and family members who provided insights into Raven's violent behavior and manipulative tendencies. Key testimonies included accounts from women who had experienced Raven's abusive behavior firsthand. These witnesses described instances of emotional manipulation and aggression, painting a picture of a man capable of committing such a heinous act. One notable witness was Janet's close friend, who testified about Janet's fears regarding Raven's unpredictable outbursts and her concerns for her safety. This testimony aimed to establish a motive rooted in Raven's abusive behavior and the deteriorating state of their marriage. The prosecution also highlighted critical evidence from the crime scene, indicating the absence of forced entry, which suggested that Janet likely knew her assailant. They argued that Raven's actions following Janet's murder, such as moving to Utah with their son Kaiden and attempting to claim a life insurance payout, were indicative of guilt. In contrast, the defense focused on the lack of direct evidence linking Raven to the murder. They argued that the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and emotional testimonies rather than concrete proof. The defense highlighted that there were no fingerprints or shoe prints matching Raven found at the crime scene, undermining the prosecution's claims. Additionally, they emphasized Raven's confirmed alibi. Multiple witnesses corroborated his presence at a soccer match during the time of Janet's murder. This alibi was crucial for the defense, as it suggested that he could not have been at home when the crime occurred. The defense also pointed out inconsistencies in witness testimonies and questioned the reliability of those who claimed to have seen or heard anything suspicious on the night of the murder. By focusing on these gaps in evidence, they aimed to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. By May 2013, After 5 long weeks of testimony and deliberation, the trial concluded with a hung jury. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, with 11 jurors voting guilty while 1 maintained innocence. This deadlock resulted in a mistrial, leaving both sides frustrated and uncertain about what would happen next. The outcome highlighted the complexities of the case. Despite compelling circumstantial evidence presented by the prosecution, the lack of direct evidence linking Raven to Janet's murder ultimately prevented a conviction. The mistrial also pointed towards deeply divided opinions regarding Raven's guilt or innocence, setting the stage for further legal proceedings in what would become a protracted battle for justice. As discussions about a potential retrial began, both sides braced for what lay ahead, knowing that this was far from over. The trial had raised more questions than answers, leaving Janet's family seeking closure and justice for their loved one's tragic death. Following the mistrial in 2013, discussions about a potential plea deal began between the prosecution and defense, as both sides sought to evaluate new evidence that had emerged during the investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence that the prosecution felt might sway the jury in the retrial was the report of Janet Abaroa's body exhumation conducted in July 2010. Among all the inconsistencies Raven had put forward, the biggest one was related to Janet's contact lenses. His claim that Janet was getting ready to go to bed was proven wrong by the exhumation report when it was confirmed that there were still fragments of contact lenses in her eyes. So, as per Detective Soul's theory, if she had not removed the lenses, she was not yet ready for bed, and if she was not ready for bed, it meant she was attacked and killed shortly after Raven left for his soccer match. Hence, the whole scenario would fall onto Raven that maybe it was Raven who pretended to go out for a football match and locked up the dog so there wouldn't be any protection for Janet. He then came back inside the house, and since Janet knew it was him, there were no signs of forced entry or call for help, which she would have done in the case of an intruder. He then committed the murder and left for the football match, which confirmed his alibi. Upon his return, he would make a 911 call where he described his wife as dead, but later changed his stance and said that she was alive upon his arrival. Although all of this was speculative evidence based on theory, and there was no match found of the bloody footprint or the fingerprint at the crime scene, it was looking likely that if another trial were to take place, the jury would be swayed towards declaring him guilty of first-degree murder. On March 12, 2014, Raven Abaroa entered an Alford plea for voluntary manslaughter in connection with the death of his wife, Janet Abaroa. This plea allowed him to acknowledge that sufficient evidence existed for a conviction without admitting guilt. The decision to accept this plea deal came after extensive discussions between the prosecution and defense following the mistrial in 2013. The terms of the Alford plea stipulated that Raven would plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter, which is a lesser charge than first-degree murder. This charge typically indicates that while the defendant did not intend to kill, there was a significant degree of recklessness or negligence involved in their actions that led to someone's death. By accepting this plea, Raven effectively acknowledged that the evidence against him was strong enough to likely result in a conviction if the case went to trial again. The acceptance of the Alford plea was influenced by several factors. After the mistrial, both sides recognized the challenge of pursuing another trial. The prosecution needed to ensure a conviction without risking another hung jury, while the defense sought to mitigate potential sentencing outcomes for Raven. As part of the plea agreement, Raven was sentenced to 8 to 10 years in prison, but received credit for time served, approximately 4 years, meaning he would serve a reduced sentence. The sentencing reflected the seriousness of Janet's death, while also considering Raven's acceptance of responsibility through the plea. Accepting the voluntary manslaughter charge allowed Raven to avoid a more severe sentence associated with first-degree murder, which carries harsher penalties and reflects premeditated intent. By pleading guilty to voluntary manslaughter, he could maintain this innocence publicly while acknowledging that his actions contributed to Janet's death. This strategic move likely aimed to reduce public scrutiny and provide some measure of closure for both families involved. Ultimately, this plea agreement marked a pivotal moment in the case, closing one chapter while leaving lingering questions about justice for Janet Abaroa and the implications of domestic violence within relationships. The acceptance of the Alford plea demonstrated how legal strategies can shape outcomes in high-stakes criminal cases, particularly when direct evidence is lacking but circumstantial evidence is compelling enough to influence decisions made by both prosecutors and defendants. On Christmas Day, December 25, 2017, Raven Abaroa was released from prison after serving time for his Alford plea of voluntary manslaughter in connection with the death of his wife, Janet Abaroa. A Upon his release, he moved back to Utah, where he sought to rebuild his life following the tumultuous events surrounding Janet's murder. In the wake of Janet's tragic death and the subsequent legal proceedings, her family remained deeply affected by the outcomes of the case. They felt that justice had not been adequately served for Janet's murder and continued to advocate for victims of domestic violence. Janet Abaroa's story has since been utilized as an example in training law enforcement regarding domestic violence investigations. Her case serves as a critical reminder of the complexities involved in such situations and the importance of thorough investigations when dealing with potential domestic abuse cases. Law enforcement agencies have incorporated lessons learned from Janet's tragic experience into their training programs to better equip officers in recognizing signs of domestic violence and responding appropriately. Through these efforts, Janet's legacy continues to impact lives beyond her own, highlighting the urgent need for awareness and advocacy in the fight against domestic violence. Her family's commitment to this case underscores their belief that no one should endure what Janet experienced, and they strive to ensure that her story contributes positively to future generations. Whether Raven Abaroa was directly involved or not, the investigations could not prove that. Yet many out there believe that his behavior towards Janet before the incident, the infidelity, the relationship with a minor, the abuse, and unpredictable outbursts of anger were enough to prove his guilt. His inconsistencies in claims he put forward to law enforcement, his actions after her death, the fact that he ran away to Utah, tried to present the entire case as a suicide, and his attempt to withdraw Janet's life insurance money even before the funeral could not have all been coincidences. Furthermore, the fact that the same abuse and unpredictable patterns of anger repeated in his second marriage also raised severe concerns about whether the law system made the right call by allowing him to go into a plea agreement and giving him a lenient charge. Regardless of it all, Raven is living his life as a free man, largely on the back of no direct evidence being found against him. Do you think he was the main culprit in his wife's brutal murder? And was the decision to find him not guilty the right one from a jury, considering a plethora of circumstantial evidence and testimonies against him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.